Hey friends, it's Kari. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a weekly wrap up and talk about the 3 books that I read this week. The first book that I read, I listened to as an audiobook, and it was The Island of Seawomen by Lisa C. And this book is historical fiction. It's set on the South Korean island of Jeju and covers the time period of Japanese colonialism in the 1930s through to World War II and on beyond the Korean War. So this book packs a lot of history into this fairly short book. I think it's only 300 and some odd pages, but you also get a peek into a very unique piece of culture on this island of Jeju. Jeju is home to the Haenyeo. The Haenyeo are female divers who, at the time of this book, they are diving without the benefit of, in the first part, wetsuits or any sort of oxygen tanks or diving apparatus. And these women train as children and they dive up until the age of 55, and they could dive up to 65 feet in depth and hold their breath for over 3 minutes underwater. They were essentially fishing. They would collect shellfish, abalone, and different sea creatures for food. And so very unique part of the culture. The Haenyeo was a very matriarchal society. Obviously, you have these women going out and doing a lot of the physical labor to get food and sustain the family. And so the men would be at home taking care of the children and doing a lot of those duties that historically have been deemed, female duties. And so in South Korea, which is a very male-dominated society at the time, this was a very unique little piece of culture. Today, the Haenyeo are classified as a living cultural heritage by the UNESCO organization. I will link an article in the description box that talks about that, and there's actually a video where you will see one of the Haenyeo divers diving, which is pretty neat. So you'll get to see the extreme nature of this work. The plot of this book centers around Young Suk, who is one of the Haenyeo, and one of her very best friends, Mija. Now, Mija is the daughter of a Japanese collaborator. You have these 2 different worlds that are colliding, and Young Suk's family, they were very anti-Japanese, and they called the Japanese the cloven-hoofed ones. And so Mija, she is guilty by association. There are a lot of doors that are closed to her simply because of her father's collaboration with the Japanese. This book is really a book about friendship. We see these 2 friends as they grow up together and they get married and they live through a lot of very trying circumstances, and we see that some tough decisions have to be made. This book also covers the Jeju uprising in 1948-1949, which I did not know a lot about, but some historians look on the Jeju uprising as kind of the unofficial start of the Korean War. You'll see some atrocities that are committed in this book, and you'll see essentially a massacre and kind of how that will affect these 2 friendships. And we do see 2 time periods going on here, so the book is flip-flopping between modern times and then the time period when Young Suk and Mija were growing up. And so you are flipping back and forth. We do see some things come full circle. This is definitely a story of friendship. This is a story of overcoming tragedy and finding forgiveness. I really enjoyed this book. My favorite part of the book was learning about an area of the world that I don't know a lot about, and also learning about this very unique and beautiful culture on this island of Jeju. The second book that I read this week was The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and this is, of course, Donna Tartt's debut novel. This is considered a dark academia book because it is set in a New England college around a group of friends, And in the first few pages, we learn that a murder has been committed. We learn that Bunny, one of these friends, has been murdered. And our narrator, Richard, admits to this. So the mystery is not who done it, but it's why did they do it. And I really enjoyed the setting. I definitely enjoyed the changing of the seasons in this book. It's definitely atmospheric and it fits with what's going on in the book. As we transition from the beautiful fall landscape into the winter, you see things are getting darker and darker. Donna Tartt has a very classic style of writing, which was very fitting for the subject matter of this book, because we follow Richard and this elite group of students who are in the Greek program, which is a very small program, and in order to be considered for a major in Greek, you have to agree to forego pretty much all of your other classes. So Richard, Bunny, Francis, Charles, Camilla, and Henry all forego kind of the usual college experience to conduct their lessons in the Lyceum with a very eccentric professor. So as this elite group of students are having classroom discussions about things like honor, morality, and beauty, we start to see secrets come to light. And this novel is definitely a page turner, but I think it's a slow burn. Our narrator, Richard, you can definitely tell he is haunted by ghosts or memories. Him telling this story, I think, was very appropriate. A lot of people who talk about this book and a lot of book reviews I've seen talk about Richard as being a, quote, unreliable narrator. Well, I looked at Richard as being, I don't want to say normal, because that's definitely not the case. Obviously, they've murdered someone, so none of these people I would consider normal. But I think Richard is very representative of a lot of college students. He is kind of lost. He is kind of floundering. He realizes that, he is kind of alone in this world. He doesn't quite fit in or quite connect with his family. When he comes to this college, he is looking for something. He thinks he's found it with this group of friends. Richard is a liar. He does lie in order to fit in with this very elite group because he is not very wealthy, and so he has to kind of put on airs to feel like he is one of the group. And I don't think that's unusual. I mean, that does make him a liar, but I think a lot of people do that. I think if you don't think that, you're kidding yourself. A lot of people will put on airs or exaggerate or make up stories in order to feel more self-important or to fit in. So I don't think that necessarily makes Richard unreliable. I think of the characters in this book, Richard is the best one really to tell this story. There's a lot of talk in this book about beauty, and beauty is seen as synonymous with terror. Beauty is seen as quite alarming and something that you would, kind of quake or quiver before. And I think that is a very apt description for this book. I think this book is beautiful, but it is terrifying. I mean, essentially we're talking about a group of college students who, in an effort to find themselves and participate in academic pursuits, they take a left turn and they commit this atrocious crime. Trying to wrap your head around how seemingly together and normal people could do this is pretty terrifying. I think this book speaks to a certain group of people who consider themselves above standards of morality and norms of society. I think that's reflected in the teacher and the professor character in this book as well. But this book is absolutely one of my favorite books. I would definitely recommend it. If you've read it, if you have comments about this book, please make sure you leave me a comment. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. The third book that I read this week was PT 109, John F. Kennedy in World War II, and this was written by Robert J. Donovan. And Robert J. Donovan was a journalist during the time period, and so he's writing this book in 1961 after John F. Kennedy has become president. When you're reading this book, you have to keep that in mind. He did let the president read this book, and so you will actually see a picture in this book of President Kennedy going through and looking at the manuscript. I don't want to talk a lot about this book because I am almost finished with this one, which is PT 109, An American Epic of War Survival and the Destiny of John F. Kennedy by William Doyle. And what I want to do is a comparison video of these two books because I think it's very interesting to read accounts of John F. Kennedy that are contemporary to his presidency, and then also to read more modern accounts and see how they differ. Definitely hindsight is 20/20, and we have a little bit more of historical perspective. And with the new book, there are also some documents and some things that that author has access to that the author in 1961 did not have access to. But then again, there are also things in 1961 that the author was able to get from eyewitnesses and interviews that maybe the more recent book does not include. So I really want to do a comparison video here in the next couple of days. I'm almost finished with that second book, so that will be coming soon. So I don't want to talk too much about that one, but I did really enjoy it. It is Kennedy, so I mean, just slap Kennedy on the title and you're good to go. So before we go today, I do have a funny little story. My dad called me and he was saying, hey, I'm listening to your book review on Call of the Wild. I hadn't watched any of your videos lately. Thanks, Dad. So even my own dad isn't watching my videos anymore. So I don't know what that says about my channel, but he talked about when he gave a book report on Call of the Wild and how it would have really helped if he had had YouTube back then, because he and his friends were unprepared for class, and one after the other they went up to the front of the room and held up the Call of the Wild, gave a book report, basically essentially from what he told me, they listed the title, the author, and said it was a story about a dog named Buck. So not very enlightening, but after one book report, young man hands the book to the next person in the row. He gets up, does his book report on Call of the Wild, hands it to the next guy in the row. And my dad participated in this nonsense because he was unprepared for class. And finally, the teacher said, that's it. There will be no more book reports on the Call of the Wild. So I think my dad probably heard more about the Call of the Wild in my book review than he heard about it in class that day, even though it sounds like half the class reported on the same book. I had to mention that story a little bit and shame him a little bit on that one. But I think we've all done that before. Not read a book or not finished a book that we were supposed to finish for class. So he's not the first student to show up unprepared for class. So we'll forgive him, especially since that was over 50 years ago. I think we can let it slide. But I hope you guys are having a great week, and let me know what you're reading. If you're reading anything good, if anything good is happening, shoot me a comment, and I will see you in my next video.